Hey folks, Mark back here to give you another vinyl update. This one I'm calling Before They Get Filed. This is albums in 12 inches that I bought throughout 2013, and I've done what I need to do with them. I've listened to them. I've either made MP3s out of them or I've just played them a lot. In any event, they're ready to get filed. But before I filed them away, I thought I'd pick out some of the more showable records. I mean, they're all showable, but these are the things I was particularly into this year, vinyl-wise. This all didn't come out this year, but it's just stuff that I liked. So I'm going to roll through pretty quick, but I hope you're all doing well. And by the way, tonight here in Cleveland, it's supposed to get to about 10 inches of snow by sunup tomorrow morning, so we'll just see if that happens. So I'm definitely glad to be indoors. Hope you all are staying warm this winter. So earlier this year, I saw Paul Collins, and he had been a member of the late 70s power pop band The Nerves, along with Peter Case, who later formed the Plimsouls, and he came through, Paul Collins did, put on a great show, and offered to, I bought a couple of his records, and he offered to sign them for me, so I said, sure, go ahead. So here's a collection of all the Nerves output, and it includes their version of, well, the original version of Hanging on the Telephone, which Blondie later covered. And this is just a collection of their EP and some live cuts and demos, The Nerves. There's the back sleeve. And then singer Paul Collins had his own band after they broke up called The Beat, which is why the English Beat had to be called that over here in the UK, because, they're called The Beat in the UK. So, yeah. Paul Collins' Beat is what they were called over here. Now it's just called The Beat, and he signed a copy of this album as well. Great power pop. If you're into late 70s short power pop songs, then you're into that. Sundial is a 90s psychedelic act I was really into, and noticed they put out a new album at the end of 2012 or beginning of 2013. It was called Mind Control, and it's essentially a guy named Gary Ramone who has a lot of really great albums. I'm quite a follower of him. This one I'm not as into. It's a little more mellow. I was hoping it would rock out a little bit more and kind of blow my brain out. And it kind of seethes. I may just need to listen to it a little bit more, but if you're going to go check out Sundial and you're into psychedelic, I would say get Other Way Out and Libertine, Reflector, or what's the one I'm thinking of? Return Journey. Get those. Those are a lot more probably what you're looking for if you're into psych. Here's something don't know much about. Spions Inc. It's a French act with a 4-track 12-inch of post-punk stuff called The Party. It came out on the Celluloid label. I don't know much about them, but it's from 79 to 84, and I just like the sleeve. So there you go. Spions Inc. If any of you guys know anything about them, leave me a comment. Let me know. If you like dub of the King Tubby Lee Perry variety, then I say pick up Fred Locke's Black Star Liner in dub. I picked this up last fall and have just been ODing on it. Just really good stuff. If you're into dub, I say pick this up. I think this was originally released in... I'm trying to find an original release date on this. This is a reissue, but I don't know exactly when it was first issued. Three Johns, 80s indie band fronted by John Langford of the Mekons. And this is a collection of the singles they put out during 1982 to 1986. And what's the name of this thing? It's called Demonocracy. Okay, Three Johns. Just good kind of machine drum, or a lot of machine drums with scratchy guitars over it. So if you're into like a little bit of early Sisters of Mercy, Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry, but with a scratchier, less gothy edge, Three Johns is more up your vibe. Here's a collection of New Zealand new wave bands from 1984. It's called the Banana Dominion. It's hit and miss, some good, some kind of schmaltzy, but I thought I'd check it out anyway. New Zealand new wave from the mid-80s. Called Banana Dominion. None of the bands on here I was familiar with at all, so I could tell you the names, but it probably wouldn't mean much to you. I did know one band, Dance Exponents. I'd heard of them. If you're into your early 80s Mute Records synth wave kind of thing, then you might be into this guy. His name is Philippe Laurent, and he put out this album called Hot Bip, and it's out on the minimal wave label, and it's 80s French minimal synth is how it's been described, and I quite liked it. Philippe Laurent. What else we got? Crystal Stilts, their last album. It is called Nature Noir. I need to spend a little more time with this. So far, I like their first two albums a little bit better than this, but you know, I really like this band a lot, and just good kind of droney psych, but highly melodic. But if you're looking for things with a little more of a creation vibe, like I don't know, Biff Bang Pow or Barry Chain, get the first two albums. This one's a little less like that, but still good nonetheless. Crystal Stilts. Here's an interesting one. Richard Lloyd, Keep On Dancin'. Richard Lloyd, guitarist of Television, 12-inch. He put out in 1985 the name Keep On Dancin', and it had an extended 12-inch dance mix. It's okay. It's not great. It's not as bad as I thought it might be, but curious nonetheless. Richard Lloyd. 12-inch from the Creation label in the late 80s called Chernobyl Baby by Baby Amphetamine. And I'd had this on a couple of compilations. Good indie dance stuff from the late 80s, female vocals. There you go. Chernobyl Baby. This has a 12-inch mix on there. Couple here from the Sacred Bones label, great psych label that's putting out a lot of awesome records. Here's one of a band called the Holy Drug Couple from South America. And this is a terrific album. I spent a lot of time with this past year, called Noctuary. Holy Drug Couple. If you like spiritualized, you know, Spaceman 3, but a little more melodic, you know, more like Black Angels, pick this up. Great stuff. Same could be said about Psychic Ills out of New York, another terrific band. This is an album they put out this past year called One Track Mind. Really good stuff. Just, if you're into psychedelic, pick it up. Here's another band. I can't remember exactly where they're from. They're called Brain Idea, and this album's called Cosmos Factory. Came out on the Mexican Summer label, and it sounds so close to the 80s Flying Nun bands like the Chills, the Bats, and the Clean. If you're into that stuff, check out this group, Brain Idea. Like them a lot. Here's a post-punk band from the UK called Bona Dish. Apparently they put out some tapes, cassette tapes in the early 1980s, and those cassette tapes have been transferred to vinyl by the wonderful Captured Tracks label. Very post-punk. If you're into Gang of Four, Delta 5, Raincoats, that kind of thing, pick this up. Bona Dish. It's called the Zaragoza tapes, 1981 to 1982. Nice little picture there. Album I never had heard of before. It's by Morgan. This came out in 1969, the year I was born, and it's called Morgan. And it was relatively cheap, about $12.99 for a sealed copy of this. I liked it. Late 60s, just kind of acid rock, very psych, melodic stuff, but it rocks. But it also is kind of mellow in parts. I don't know. I really dug this. Morgan. Band, another psych band, I believe out of Texas. They're called Holy Wave. I've seen them a couple times, and they're awesome. Again, if you're into Black Angels and that kind of thing, you will definitely like these guys. This is an album called Evil Hits that they put out this past year. Swedish band called the Marionettes. If you like Echo and the Bunnymen, I would say surely pick up their first couple of records, their self-titled album, and one called Islands, that's very much got that Wild Swans, Bunnymen, you know, just that cold, rainy day kind of sound. Their last album was called Hit the Waves. It came out this past year, and it's also got that vibe to it, but it's a little more synth-oriented. So, I still liked it, though. But it just depends. If you're more into guitars, get their earlier stuff. If you like Echo and the Bunnymen, you're a shoo-in to be a fan for this group. Band out of Detroit called the Ritual Howls. I don't know much about them other than they're from Detroit. I believe they're a trio, could be wrong. But very dark, brooding, post-punky psych. Probably the best way to describe them. Ritual Howls. Here's one that lit me up. It's called Punky Reggae and Post-Punk Dub from 78 to 84. How great does that sound? Well, it's pretty good. And it collects a lot of just stray tracks by dub-inspired punk bands. You know, so bands like the Slits, Ruts DC are on here. Also, Peter and the Test Tube Babies had a dubbish track that made it on here. The Glaxo Babies, Family Fodder, two other really good bands. I was already familiar with them, but the stuff on here is great. And then Sir Horatio, which is a pseudonym of A Certain Ratio. They're on here as well. So if you like your post-punk and a dub kind of style, pick this up. Act I don't know a whole lot about, but I do know I like this. It's called Linnea Aspera. And it's an album that they put out. It's a self-titled album on Dark Entries. It came out just last year. And it's just good melodic synth pop. Chris and Cozy comes to mind. October Love Song, that kind of vibe. If you're into that, check out this act here. They're called Linnea Aspera. So there you go. Female vocal. Here's something I used to see a lot in the stores in the early 90s. It's an album called Home. And I found this for a really good price. It's just a bunch of Manchester bands from the early 1980s or 90s, kind of in the Manchester baggy era. So you get things like Swirl, New Fast Automatic, Daffodils, Rain Kings, Paris Angels, World of Twist, Mark E. Smith, Milltown Brothers, and Revenge, Peter Hook's band. Remember them? They're on here. So it's just a good little collection of stray tracks from the Manchester area around circa 1990. Here's an album by UB40. They had a US mini album called Little Bag of Rhythm. This is the UK counterpart. Found it for $1. And it's an LP, a full-length LP with a 12-inch of just UB40 and dub. And if you're not familiar with UB40's early work like Present Arms or Signing Off, do get that. Especially if all you know is Red Red Wine and all the covers. Boy, they did some great stuff of their own. And they have a dub album called Present Arms and Dub from like 81. And if you can get your hands on that, put that next to your King Tubby albums, and it'll sit quite nicely. This was also very good. Bag of Rhythm. I believe this came out in 85. Yeah, 1985. 12-inch called The Amazon by The Long Honeymoon. I got this because it was cheap, but also because it was produced by Laurie Latham, who had done the Stranglers' Oral Sculpture album and also the Bunnymen's Bring on the Dancing Horses. So I knew he had a very glossy, smooth kind of production style, and I was curious to hear this. Also co-produced by Glenn Tilbrook and Chris Difford of Squeeze. So how could I lose? It's good. It's kind of nice tropical funk. A lot of strings in it. I liked it. The Amazon by The Long Honeymoon. Here's something by Sex Church. Very sludgy, grimy, Mary Chain-ish kind of stuff. Noise, indie rock with a post-punk feel. Is that enough adjectives for you? Sex Church. I don't know much about them, but this album's called Growing Over. And how can you... I just couldn't resist an album by a group called Sex Church, and when I heard it, I was like, I love this. So if you're into Mary Chain, Sex Church, check them out. Got this because it was real cheap, and I love the song, China by the Red Rockers. Great song. I've always had the 45 of it. This 12-inch had an extended mix and a B-side, a different B-side than the 7-inch. The B-side of this 12-inch was a cover of Ball of Confusion. That's what the world is today. So, good cover, too. I quite liked it. A few more things to show you here. Moon Duo. It's a guy out of the psychedelic band Wooden Ships. And he has a duo with a woman. I can't remember her name. But they have done a couple of really good records. I've seen them at Austin Psych Fest. Moon Duo are great. Kind of droney psych. Really mellow, but just good stuff. And they had an album called Mazes that they put out a little over a year ago. And this is a remix album of that called Mazes Remixed. Wow. And Sonic Boom from Spaceman 3, Spectrum, Psychic Ills, who I showed earlier. They do a remix on here. Purling Hiss. And then a couple of acts I've never heard of like Cave and Eagle Boston Cover. I don't know them. But good stuff. They're Mazes Remixed. Stress, an early 90s UK dance band with kind of a guitar-y, wah-wah guitar edge to them. Very kind of Manchester-ish. This is a 12-inch I didn't have by them called Flowers in the Rain. I have another one called Beautiful People, which is awesome. So good stuff. Very melodic, danceable pop from the UK. Early 90s. Interesting one here. This is a 12-inch on the Brunswick label. You don't see 12-inch singles on the Brunswick label much. And it's called Bounce, Rock, Skate, and Roll Part 1. By Vaughn Mason and crew. Just, fun disco. It was nice to see a 12-inch on the Brunswick label. I have a lot of 45s by acts like the Chi Lights and Jackie Wilson, so it was good to see that. Jenya Ravon, don't know much about her. Jenya Raven, not sure how you say her name. But an old roommate of mine had this album, and it has a song called I Won't Sleep on the Wet Spot No More. And I love that title. And I found this for $1, and this came out in '79. just good kind of power pop from the late 70s. Kind of hard to describe, but there you go. If you like late 80s house music, which I like a lot, then you no doubt like Todd Terry, and I found a full length called the Todd Terry Project, and it's called, what is the name of this album? It is called Let the Batmobile Let's Go. To the Batmobile Let's Go. And it has one of my favorite late 80s 12 inches, Weekend. Great house track, and it's featured on here in its LP version along with some other tracks. So for $1, I thought I'd check it out, see how it is. From Liverpool in the early 1980s was a band called New Wave Act called Cook the Books, and I have one of their 12 inches. Their stuff's always pretty hard to find. If you're into China Crisis and the Lotus Eaters and more of the popish Liverpool stuff from the early 80s, you might like Cook the Books. This is one they put out called Caress Me Like a Flower. And I actually haven't heard this yet, so it's not quite ready to file away. I just picked this up in Columbus a couple weeks ago. Band called The Gadgets. This is an early 80s synth band from the UK. Matt Johnson of The was briefly a member of this band. This is one of, I think, 4 albums they have out. This one's called Infantry, and it came out in, looking for the year, and I'm not seeing the year, but I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say 1982, because I know they existed from like 79 to 82, basically. Gadgets, early minimal synth. If you like early Mute Records, Fat Gadget, that kind of thing, grab it. Just a couple more to show. Wow, this is the second album by Moby Grape. Found it for $6 in pretty good shape. Of course, Moby Grape were formed by Skip Spence, who had previously been in the Jefferson Airplane. Their first album is a lot of great up-tempo, garagey rock tracks, but in a Southern California kind of feel. Well, actually, San Francisco kind of feel. But this one's got more of a laid-back feel to it. You know, after Skip Spence left, which was after the first album, they did this, another one called Moby Grape 69, and another one called Truly Fine Citizen. All very laid-back country rock, which I like a lot, but not much like the first album. So, then here's an interesting one called Gunfire and Pianos, another one I remember seeing in the shops in the 80s and never buying. This is a collaboration compilation from the magazine Zigzag, which was a really cool magazine in the 80s. I bought a lot of issues of that. And then Situation 2 Records, the really cool indie label that had, you know, Gene Loves Jezebel and the Cult's early records. This is just a compilation they put out, Gunfire and Pianos, and some of the bands on here: Jazz Butcher, Pastels, Brigandage, The Very Things, Naked Ray Gun, what else is on here? Psychic TV, Age of Chance, All About Eve, and I always loved this band's name, Finish the Story. Never heard them, but I always liked their name, so they're on here. And last but not least, I saw this band just last weekend, Bass Drum of Death, another new garagey psychedelic type band. Just if you're into like highly melodic garage rock, not again similar to Black Angels, I keep dropping that name, but they're a lot like that. Or Crocodiles, if you're into that group. Bass Drum of Death are fantastic, and if they come through town and you're into Mary Chain or anything like that, go see these guys. Bass Drum of Death. This is their first album. They have a new one that's incredible, but I went ahead and picked up the first because I didn't have a copy of it. That's it. Hope you all are staying warm out there. Hope to see more of your albums that you keep posting up on the Facebook page. I love seeing that. That's pretty much all I got for now. See you later.